It's 3 a.m. You're wide awake. No reason, no noise. Your body just decided it was done sleeping for a while, and now you're staring at the ceiling, wondering what's wrong with you. Here's the thing. Nothing is wrong with you. You might actually be sleeping exactly the way humans slept for most of history, but the real answer is far stranger than your sleep is broken. For decades, one story about ancient sleep spread everywhere. You've probably heard it. Before electric light, humans supposedly slept in 2 separate chunks each night, with an hour or 2 of quiet wakefulness in between. Read a bit, pray a bit, talk with a partner, then drift back into a second sleep until dawn. It sounds ancient. It sounds natural. It's been used to explain everything from modern insomnia to why so many people wake up at 3 a.m. feeling broken. But is it actually what ancient humans did? The story starts with a historian, not a scientist. Roger Ekirch spent over a decade combing through diaries, court records, medical texts, and literature from pre-industrial Europe. He found hundreds of references to something called first sleep and second sleep. People wrote about waking in the middle of the night as if it were completely ordinary. Some prayed, some had sex, some visited neighbors. Chaucer mentioned it. So did Dickens. Ekirch concluded that before artificial light flooded the modern world, segmented sleep was the normal human pattern, disrupted only by the invention of the light bulb. This idea exploded in popularity. It felt validating. If you wake up at 3 a.m., you're not broken. You're ancient. You're doing what your ancestors did for tens of thousands of years. Except there's a problem. Ekirch's evidence came almost entirely from pre-industrial Europe, a specific place, a specific time period, not from humanity as a whole, and definitely not from our deep evolutionary past. So a group of researchers decided to actually test this. If segmented sleep is truly ancient and universal, it should show up in populations still living without electricity today. The UCLA sleep scientist Jerome Siegel led a landmark study examining 3 modern hunter-gatherer and forager societies, the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, the Tsimane of Bolivia. These groups have no electricity, no artificial light pollution, nothing resembling a modern bedroom. If biphasic sleep were a deep biological default, this is exactly where you'd expect to find it. What did they find instead? Almost none of it. Across all 3 groups, people slept in 1 consolidated block each night, not 2. No widespread first sleep and second sleep. No universal midnight waking period. Their average sleep duration was actually shorter than many modern populations get, hovering around 6 to 7 hours, and their bedtime wasn't dictated by darkness the way you might assume. They typically stayed awake for several hours after sunset, gathered around fire, talking before finally settling into sleep. Sound familiar? That's essentially what many modern humans do too, just with a screen instead of a flame. So, which version is true? The historian's segmented sleep or the anthropologist's single consolidated block? Here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Both might be right, just describing different things. The psychiatrist Thomas Wehr ran an experiment in the 1990s that adds a critical piece to this puzzle. He placed participants in extended darkness, roughly 14 hours a night, for weeks at a time, mimicking the long winter nights of the pre-industrial world Ekirch studied. What happened? The participants' sleep gradually split into 2 distinct phases, separated by 1 to 3 hours of quiet wakefulness, almost identical to Ekirch's historical descriptions. But this pattern only emerged under those extended darkness conditions. It wasn't the default human sleep pattern. It was what happens to a modern human body when night stretches far longer than a single sleep cycle can fill. This reframes the entire question. Segmented sleep in pre-industrial Europe likely wasn't some ancient biological hardwiring going back to our earliest ancestors. It was a response to unusually long winter nights in certain climates, at certain latitudes, during certain historical periods, when there simply wasn't enough darkness-appropriate activity to fill 14 hours, and the body naturally split its rest to match. Meanwhile, hunter-gatherer societies living closer to the equator, with more consistent day-night cycles year-round, never developed this pattern because they never needed to. So what did ancient humans actually do when they couldn't sleep? For most of human evolutionary history, the honest answer is probably not much, because it likely wasn't a widespread problem in the way it is now. Sleep researchers studying these forager societies found something else striking. Rates of reported insomnia were remarkably low, despite far more environmental noise, far less consistent temperature control, and none of the comforts of a modern mattress. Whatever their sleep looked like, it apparently worked well enough that lying awake anxious about not sleeping simply wasn't a common complaint. Compare that to modern life, where an estimated 1 in 3 adults report regular sleep difficulty. What actually changed? A few things, and they're worth sitting with. Artificial light suppresses melatonin production directly, pushing your internal clock later than it would naturally run. Ancient environments had no screens emitting blue light directly into your eyes an hour before bed. Modern environments also introduce something ancient humans never had to deal with: a strict, externally imposed wake-up time disconnected from your body's actual sleep pressure. Your ancestors woke when their body was done sleeping. You wake when an alarm decides you're done, whether your body agrees or not. There's also the anxiety layer, and this might be the most important piece. Waking at 3 a.m. isn't inherently dangerous. It never was. But modern humans have attached enormous meaning to it. You wake up, and instead of assuming this is simply what a night's sleep sometimes looks like, you panic. You check the time. You calculate how many hours you have left. You start worrying about being tired tomorrow, which produces a stress response, which makes falling back asleep even harder. Ancient humans waking briefly in the night almost certainly didn't spiral into this kind of anxious accounting because there was no cultural expectation that sleep had to be one uninterrupted block to count as good sleep. That expectation itself is remarkably new. It's largely a product of industrial work schedules, demanding consistent, consolidated blocks of rest to fit consistent, consolidated blocks of labor. Ancient humans didn't have shift schedules. Their sleep could flex with the seasons, the light, the temperature, and their own bodies without anyone telling them they were doing it wrong. So the next time you wake up at 3 a.m., here's what the research actually suggests. You're probably not broken. You're not failing at some ancient biological requirement your ancestors mastered effortlessly. Depending on the season and how much darkness surrounds you, brief nighttime waking might be a completely normal variation your body is capable of, not a malfunction demanding fixing. The mistake isn't waking up. The mistake is the panic that follows it. A purely modern invention layered on top of an ancient, ordinary biological event. Your ancestors, whether in an equatorial hunter-gatherer camp or a candlelit European cottage centuries ago, weren't lying awake worrying about being awake. They were simply awake for a while, in the dark. And then, eventually, they weren't. Maybe that's the real lesson buried in all this research. It's 3 a.m. You're wide awake. No reason, no noise. Your body just decided it was done sleeping for a while. And that might not be something broken in you at all. It might just be an old, ordinary rhythm, finally showing up in a world that forgot how to recognize it.